Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining. Today we are presenting the PM is a Change Manager, Change Our Minds. A little bit of housekeeping just before we get started. It does seem to work best if you mute yourselves during the presentation, but we do have Kelly on the chat, so we do encourage you to ask your questions in the chat, and Kelly will answer them as we go, and then at the end we'll also have time to answer the questions as well. So we definitely do invite you to participate in the features of the WebEx webinar. All right. So before we get into who Drew and I are and Kolme, I just want to kind of start with an agenda. So we'll talk about our company. We'll talk about what's the problem, why are our projects failing. We'll next go over to the missing link, and we'll talk a little bit about organizational change management, introduce that to you guys. And then Drew's going to go into a little bit more deep dive of the different OCM models and methodology. And because we are all PMs, or the majority of us are, we're going to talk a little bit about incorporating OCM into different process groups and our project plans. So we'll sprinkle some change management throughout our projects. And then towards the end, we are going to wrap up with Q&A. So it should be a pretty exciting hour. Thank you again for joining us today. All right. So our company, Kolme Group, is a PPM consultancy specializing in PPM onboarding and PMO maturity assessments, agile transformations, and OCM initiatives. We spent decades managing programs and portfolios in the tens of millions, and we were constantly frustrated with the limited tools available to manage our portfolios. That's when we discovered data-driven PPM, which is project and portfolio management, and it was such a revolution that we decided to make it our focus. We are based here in Phoenix, Arizona, but we have office globally. So we wanted to share just some quick facts with you guys. So we have 11 team members in, we have 11 time zones. Our team members span 11 different time zones. And we have, our group has been past and previous PMI and PMI chapter members and current ones as well. They make up Phoenix, Mile High, Puget Sound, Ottawa Valley, and Honolulu. And 27% of our staff is ProSci certified, which we will get into a little bit about what ProSci is in a little bit. And 64% of our team is PMI certified. So we definitely contribute and volunteer and love the PMI community. So we're happy to be here today. Kim Essendrup, he's one of our co-founders at Kolme, and he's also the co-host of the Project Management Happy Hour, and he's actually been on 3 other PMI Phoenix webinars, including Scope Creep, How Much Does a PPM Tool Cost, and he participated in a panel about the merging roles of PMs and BAs. So hopefully you've heard of us, Kim and Kolme. All right, so let's get to our presenters. So first, Drew, do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Hi, guys. Drew Middleton. I've been a project manager for longer than I would care to admit, and I'm actually a former member of your chapter. I lived in Phoenix for about 4.5, 5 years, about a decade ago, so I was a member of your chapter. I've also been a member of the Mile High chapter in Denver, where we have other members right now. And currently I live in the Seattle area, not actually in Seattle, but in the Puget Sound area, so I'm a member of the PMI Puget Sound chapter. In addition to being a PMP certification holder, I'm also a Scrum Master, and I'm a ProSci certified change practitioner. So that's a PCCP. I'm sure you guys all know that one. All right, maybe not new one for you. And I'm here because we want to talk about organizational change management. We think it's a critical factor to the success of ongoing project managers everywhere. And so hopefully we can share a little bit about that with you tonight. Corey?
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. So my name is Cornelia Homewood, but as you can tell, I go by Corey because that's a lot easier to say. I've been a project manager going on a decade, and I've been working on projects in IT, professional services, higher education, and marketing. I am a member of the PMI Phoenix, and if anyone is getting their PMP, I do highly encourage you to do the weekend study group. I drove to Phoenix every Saturday morning and met with Ken Roundtree, and it was awesome, and I passed. So I am now a certified project management professional. Again, thank you, study group. I'm also a professional Scrum Master, so a little bit on the Agile side, and as Drew mentioned, ProSci Certified Change Practitioner. So you can say I am in love with PM, and I nerd out about it, and I love all things project management. Drew and I are also very active on social media as well as Kolme. So you can see here we've put some icons. We do encourage you to reach out to us in LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, or you can call us in emails. We are happy to chat. All right, Drew. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's switch gears and talk about why our projects are failing.
Sure. And we don't want to be beating ourselves up too badly, right? We're all project management professionals here. We think we're pretty good at our jobs. But let's face it, not everything goes right every time. So I'm going to take you on a little journey. First thing I'm going to say is that I've realized, especially this year, it seems, that I'm old. I'm not the young kid on the block anymore like I once was. And what that means is I'm now screaming at kids, hey, get off my lawn. That's just my gig. But also it means I remember back in the 1990s, the Standish Group. And every year the Standish Group would put out the chaos report. I don't know how many of you guys remember that. I might be just dating myself too much here. But the chaos report was just this withering, terrible report on the state of project management as a profession. And every year it'd come out, and every year they would have horrible facts and figures in there saying how bad we are all doing as professional project managers. And it was fascinating, and it was just like any other bad news. Everybody waited for it. The Standish report, the chaos report's here, but it was never good news. And I think they finally gave up on doing that, probably for the better, right? I mean, nobody needs that kind of news in their lives every day. But the fact is, even though they may not be publishing that anymore, we still have a situation where we aren't 100% successful. And it's true, we'll never be 100% successful. We'll strive for perfection, we'll never reach it, right? So what we want to talk about tonight is not necessarily all the successes and the great stuff that we do. We want to talk about the failures because we learn from failure. So let's go on this journey. Let's talk about this. Let's say that you are a rock star project manager. You're just kicking it, right? Your projects are delivering on time. They're on budget. The product that they deliver is great. The scope is met. Your work breakdown structures are dialed. Your PowerPoint presentations, they're works of art like ours, right? I mean, they should be on a museum wall somewhere. People should be just oohing and awing. Okay, that's great. But then the project wraps up. Come along with me on this. A year later, and nobody's using the product that you created or the service. It's just sitting there gathering dust. In fact, chances are the organization has spun up a new project to put a new service or a new product in to replace yours. Is that really a success? Can we call that a success? Well, we were on time, on budget, got our deliverables done. Sure, we rocked it, right? Except maybe we didn't. So this is what we're going to talk about tonight. Maybe we're not doing the great job that we all think that we are. If we put all our focus, all our energy on those project management tangible things, the deliverables, making sure that we've dotted our I's, crossed our T's on our project schedules, that's great, but we're not delivering value. We're not delivering that benefit realization that we need to be. So we have to forget about those tangible things for a little bit and think about the intangibles, the people side of project management. Think about our stakeholders. If a project is creating something new, something unique, then that means by definition, it's an agent of change. And people hate change, right? I mean, they just hate it. Change is difficult. So we're trained, we're experienced, but are we getting it done? So I'm going to take it just on a very quick journey through my career. I started out originally as I was a Mitel phone switch programmer back in the day. This is going back, and then did some COBOL, but then realized very quickly that I love projects. And so I became a project manager. And as I said, this is, I don't know, many years ago, a couple of decades back. So I was old school, right? And I did waterfall project management. And I realized that on a lot of my projects, we really struggled with certain areas, in particular requirements. Sometimes I had a professional business analyst on there, sometimes I didn't. And as Cornelia mentioned, we recently with your chapter had a panel discussion about kind of merging those roles. What happens when the project manager needs to also be a business analyst? Well, in my career, I felt that very personally. It was actually impacting my success. So I reached out to the IIBA. I became a member of the International Institute for Business Analysis in the Phoenix chapter, as a matter of fact. Studied up on the BA BOK, similar to the PMBOK. It's the BA body of knowledge. And I gained a tool set, and my role as project manager expanded. I increased my capability. So I had a new tool in my toolbox, and that was business analysis. But it wasn't just winging it, right? It was business analysis with a method, with methodology. And so it was with intent. And then a little while later, came on to another situation where my project management toolbox wasn't getting the job done. Agile was the new thing. Everybody wanted agile. Every C-level person you talked to was saying, well, are we going to be agile about this? And they didn't know what it meant, but they wanted it. So I did the same thing that I'd done before, and I went out and I expanded my tool set. I got a Scrum certification. And if any of you've gotten a Scrum certification, you know it's not a terribly difficult thing to do. It's I think a 2 or 3 day class, and then you sit for an exam. So it's not even necessarily a practitioner cert. But I got it, and I added that tool to my toolbox, and I practiced it. I worked on agile projects. I made sure that those C-level folks knew that when it comes to a project, we have a choice now. We can decide, do we want to go waterfall? Do we want to go agile? Let's put the appropriate methodology in place, and then we can succeed. And sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. So we get back to the problem. What are we trying to solve here? Why are we failing? If we've got all these great tools and we have this toolbox that's just brimming with really good techniques and practices, why are we failing? And so what we're going to talk about tonight is that we're failing because we need to not just deliver the tangible things. We've got to deliver transformation. And for that, I think that there's something else that we can do here. So what's the problem? Well, if we go back to the problem statement, as I said, we've created this great product, we've completed our project, wrapped it up, and then when we go away, it's not adopted. It lingers, it languishes. So adoption is the problem. It's the people side. So creating change isn't enough. As I said, we have to create transformation. So I'll share with you this analogy. I like analogies. You may have heard this one. It's called the burning platform. Let's say that you're an oil rig worker. You're out in the Gulf of Mexico. Everything's good. You're drilling for oil. You're happy. You're safe. You're warm. Well, all of a sudden you notice you're too warm. You look around and your oil rig is on fire. So you try to put the fire out and you fail. And the fire just keeps going. It's an oil rig, right? They burn. So things are really bad. You need to make a change. So you jump into the sea. Now, that's the analogy. It's called the burning platform because the oil rig's burning. And the change is that you're no longer in mortal danger from the fire on the oil rig. And that's great, except that now you're in mortal danger of drowning because you're in the sea. So you were motivated to change and you made the change, but are you happy where you landed? No, now you're actually motivated to do more change, right? You're actively resisting the fact that you're now treading water. You're looking for a boat. You're trying to get to land. So when we talk about this analogy, this burning platform, we talk about why did the oil rig worker make the change? External forces were acting upon them. They had no internal motivation to make that change. They were happy. You were happy, you were warm, you were doing your job, and somebody made you change. A fire came up and you had to change. So what happens then is we see resistance. If we take this now back to really a business analogy or a business situation, people resist change. The dictionary definition of resistance is a force that slows down or prevents motion. And that's exactly what we see. When our project wraps up, people resist whatever it is that our project created. And you can put attributes on that of, oh, that's bad, or resistance is futile, whatever you want to say. But first we have to understand, why are people resistant? And I think it's really, really important that as project managers, we come to terms with this. Resistance is natural. It's the natural human response to change. If we think about this, it makes sense, right? People are doing a job and they get performance reviews based on their job. and they get good and they get comfortable at doing their job. And then we come in as project managers, we bring in our project, we make people change, and all of a sudden they're not as good at doing their job anymore because now they got to do it differently. Or maybe they have to do it with a different set of people. Or maybe they're just doing a completely different job altogether. Have we properly prepared them for that change? Is that on us as project managers? Well, let's get into that. Another thing we have to do as project managers, we have to understand and accept that there will be resistance, and then we have to listen. Because by listening, we can figure out why there's resistance. Yes, there's going to be resistance, but there's different things that people key on when they're faced with a change. If we can understand what those are, if we can see who's resisting the change, why are they resisting this, give them a voice in the change, then we're probably going to be in a better position to actually help them navigate the change. And in addition to listening, then we've got to be active listeners, right? It isn't just a matter of let's let them gripe, have a little session, and then, okay, we go away and they should be good, right? They get it off their chest. Doesn't work that way. We have to be active listeners. We've got to ask them the right questions. We've got to show them that we are listening and that we take their input seriously. Are they angry about the change? Are they worried about losing something, losing control? Those are the types of things that we can delve into, because then we can start to work with them to handle that. And I know it's feelings. Oh my gosh, it's mushy. But that's the challenge, right? And so if that's the challenge, if that's what's happening when our projects went well, but then they didn't, well, what can we do about it? And what we're going to posit to you tonight is that we can use OCM, Organizational Change Management. Corey, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. All right, so as Drew mentioned, we believe the missing link is OCM. So let's start with what change management is not. We are all familiar with the PMBOK project change control. I carried around the PMBOK in my purse for probably 4 years while I was studying the test. So I hope you guys are all familiar with it. So in the PMBOK project change control, we identify what the changes are. These are typically stemmed from issues and risk. We document the change in our change log. We submit approval to the change board via a change request, and then we wait for our change request to be approved or declined, and then based on the outcome, we baseline our project and we move on. So I bet that's how most of us think about change from a PM perspective. So let's open up our lens and talk about change from a broader perspective, and that is the people side of change. So as Drew mentioned a little bit earlier, organizational change management focuses on the people side of change. Think of it this way. If your project is going to change a person's location, process, system or tool, job role, mindset, reporting structure, compensation, or behavior, that is going to affect the person. So then we also have to think about, are they ready, willing, and able to take on this new change? So it goes beyond the project deliverables. It's focused, again, on the people side of change. So if you think about the degree of change impact, so those items I mentioned before, that your project has, along with how each person processes the change, will help you understand the level of change management that's necessary to make your project successful, long after you submit your closing notes and move on to your next project. Because at the end of the day, you have the perfect project closeout. You could have all your KPIs with high marks. You were on time, you were on budget, you met scope. But if the people that your project impacted did not end up changing how they do their job and continue to support the benefits your project was meant to deliver, then it's going to be a failure. So Drew, do you want to take us through a little bit more about OCM?
Yeah, let's get class in session here. We'll do a little bit of learning. So, one thing we want to say, this is not about selling you guys on one particular methodology. There's a lot of different change management methodologies out there. Full disclosure, Kolme Group has pretty much subscribed to one, and we'll talk about that one a bit, but we're not trying to get you to sign up for that. That's not what this is about. The idea really is that, just like with my example of the business analysis challenge, if you're just winging it, you're probably not going to be as successful as you would be if you had a methodology. It doesn't matter which methodology, pick one, get good at it. And that's just going to give you another tool in that toolbox. So let's talk about a couple of methodologies. We're going to go way back in the Wayback Machine here with Kurt Lewin. Kurt Lewin was a psychologist. He worked on change processes in the 1940s, actually. And he came up with his Lewin's change model. I guess he was, he wasn't too humble. He named it after himself. That's okay. But what he figured out, and I think that this holds true today, is that people really aren't ready for change just right out of the blocks, right? That something has to happen. So he used an analogy. I like analogies, so we'll use his. He talked about if you have a block of ice, and he said, if you want to reshape this block of ice into any other shape, a sphere, a cone, whatever, without changing the mass of it, you can't just chisel away at that because that would reduce the size of the block of ice. What do you have to do to change it? Well, you got to do three things. First, you have to unfreeze it because a block of ice, it's frozen. Then you have to change it when it's in a state where it's ready for change, and then you've got to refreeze it. So unfreeze, change, and refreeze. He said that analogy applies to people. People are in this state where they're very resistant to change, as we know, and they aren't really ready or open to change. So we have to move them from that state into a readiness phase. And he had several ways of doing that. If you want to, you can do a little research on Mr. Lewin. But essentially what he said is that once we get people into this sort of mindset where they're accepting and open to change, then we can start doing things that will help them embrace the change. Finally, though, once that change is in place, we got to refreeze them. We got to get them out of that mindset of, hey, I'm ready for change, because now we've got to get them back into a, this is the way that we do things now mentality. So that was the 1940s, and that was one of the first change methodologies out there. In the 1970s, we learned a different way of looking at this. This is the McKinsey 7S framework. This one's pretty standard as well. You'll find this in a lot of materials. Governments have used this. It's pretty widely known. McKinsey is a well-known group. So in the 1970s, they came out with their 7S process. And what they said is that there are 7 different elements of change: strategy, structure, systems, shared values, skills, style, and staff. I dare you to say that 5 times fast. But they categorize these into hard and soft elements. The hard elements are the strategy, structure, and systems. And they said that these are things that we can essentially leverage authority to help people change. So they're management-driven change attributes or change elements. The other ones, the shared values, the skills, the style, and the staff, are more soft elements. And if we're going to be successful at change, we have to give equal weight to both types. So that was McKinsey, that was 7S. It's still used to some extent, but I think it's a little cumbersome. Slightly more recently, and by slightly, we're talking the late 1990s, a group came around called ProSci, and they were founded by a gentleman named Jeff Hyatt, and he was very much like my company, Kolme Group. He was enamored with data, and so he used studies and he used data to come up with his model for change, and his model is called ADKAR, and it's an acronym. It stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And the trick with his model is that he treats each of those as a barrier point. So in order to move from one to the next, you've got to get through that barrier. So if you have awareness, but you don't yet desire the change, you're not going to move on to knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And likewise, if you have knowledge, but you don't yet have the ability, you're not going to be successful in the change. So this was kind of his process, this ADKAR process, and it's what we find works pretty well. There's a bit more to it than that. But there's also some similarities going all the way back to Lewin's model here. There are 3 different sort of phases that the ADKAR process goes through: preparing for change, managing the change, reinforcing the change. And that's very similar to the frozen state, unfrozen or ready for change, and refrozen states of the Lewin process. So you can see none of this is rocket science. The trick then is just having this in your toolbox, having something to fall back on when you are trying to help people prepare for that change. And there's a lot of tools and techniques that go with each of these methodologies. We're not going to get into all of that tonight. If you're interested, there's many others out there. Certifications abound. We are big fans of the ProSci methodology. We find that it works well. So we've got their certification, the ProSci Certified Change Practitioner. There's also a Change Management Institute out there. There's the Association of Change Management Professionals. So again, this is not about picking one methodology versus another. It's about picking one methodology, learning to do it well. That's really the point we're trying to get here, because it's always going to be better than just winging it. What do you think, Corey?
I like it. So we have the next part, we're going to talk a little bit about the process groups, as we mentioned before. So going back to our favorite resource, the PMBOK, we are all familiar with the 5 traditional process groups. So for the next part, we have this broken down how to sprinkle in different parts of OCM into each of these process groups. So we begin with initiation. Here you are setting the vision of what is to be accomplished, and in OCM, your sponsor will actually own this vision. And sponsor visibility is key. Sponsors often think they are solely needed at the beginning of the project or are just there to make executive decisions. But the fact is, sponsors need to be involved throughout the life cycle of the project. They need to help us make decisions, and they need to participate in actions, like communicating the change and continuing to build a sponsor coalition to gain momentum from the other higher-ups when needed. So the 2 key tools and techniques that change management uses in working with sponsors are a coaching plan and the sponsor roadmap. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those. So a good change management approach will include the coaching plan, and this enables managers and supervisors to become effective change agents. Managers are important, and it is because employees generally trust them, they are close to where the change happens, and they can mitigate resistance and help build support. So we like to think of this as coaching the coaches. The coaching plan helps leaders to understand the change and their role, as well as their employees' role, develop competencies for managing change, along with adapting the change that is happening to them, and identify where their own resistance may be. And this is really important. Remember that managers are employees first, and then they're managers. They have their own process and their own change journey that they're embarking on. Next, we have the sponsorship roadmap. And this will highlight the key activities and responsibilities your primary sponsor will need to support the change. And again, I'm emphasizing that the sponsor needs to be involved throughout the life cycle of the project. This roadmap provides the opportunity to reinforce the message to the sponsor that involvement is important throughout the project to be successful. So they see it on their roadmap of they're there from the beginning to the end. And keep in mind that our sponsors need to walk the walk. We are all very perceptive people, and people will notice if a leader verbally promotes a change, but does not support it through their actions and behaviors. And staff will not believe in the change if the leaders do not. So we want to stay away from this partial and fractional support. All right, so we continue through our PMBOK process groups. So next we have planning. And with planning, the significant part about planning is that we are able to think through the whole project. So not only are we looking at creating a variety of plans that the PMBOK lays out in the knowledge areas, we all know about scope management, schedule management, quality management, but we also need to consider all the things that might go wrong, so risk management, and how we might respond to them. I know we have all had these projects where someone comes in last minute and either throws up their hands in frustration because they never signed on to this change, or they may say that they weren't aware or they don't understand why it's happening. And if you guys are familiar with NPS scoring, I would call these people the detractors. They are the people that are going to be a thorn in your side and may even go as far as sabotaging your project. So what does change management teach us? We all want to hide under our desk and hope they go away. Just kidding. We need to get these people on board first and turn them into power users and promoters. So again, another NPS term. We don't want to avoid the problem. We want to get in front of it. So as a project manager, it's our responsibility to make sure the right people are in the room and involved in our project. You need to ask your team or important stakeholders early on who may be considered a flight risk. So this is typically the person that is most resistant to change. Or you could even say the most set in their ways, the different way that they're going to hear that so that they can make sure that those people are involved in your project at minimum during user acceptance testing or a pilot group, but even better if they can be on the project team the whole time. All right, so the next part about planning is the WIFM. So if you guys have never heard of this term, it is what's in it for me. And again, considering our planning process, we need to anticipate how people will react to the change. We need to get ahead of the messaging so that we can own it. And Drew's talked a lot about, human nature and resistance. So the first thing people think when they hear the change is, how's this going to affect me? So we need to get ahead of this communication by addressing the WIFM. And as we all know, project management communication is key. So we want to take more of an intentional approach with this communication, where we're going beyond the communication of just status reports and issues tracking by helping our project team think bigger and address company-wide communications to advocate and prepare people for the change. So as PMs, we want to start to ask what communication channels we can leverage to help get the messaging out. You can start small with, get excited, something new is happening, and then make sure to follow up with the WIFM by touting the benefits it will bring to the person so they know for sure what's in it for them. So for example, will it bring better processes? Will it bring more efficiencies? Maybe your project will help provide visibility or transparency of processes or company health. And, honestly, I know sometimes with mergers and acquisitions, those can be scary, but they can also create more opportunity for career or personal advancement. And the person might not be thinking that way yet. So we want to take the rumor mill and the opportunity for people to fill in their own gaps, that we want to take that risk down and get ahead of it. So like the PMBOK outlines the plans needed for project management, we have some new plans for you in change management, and that would be the training plan and the resistance plan. So with the training plan, change management challenges us to get out and center from the beginning. So we want to put the training first. You want to put it earlier in your project, and it doesn't have to be the whole end user list. Again, this is an opportunity to identify your power users, your pilot groups, and your flight risks. And honestly, they might become your strongest allies, and you'll have additional resources to help train. So if you need to crash your schedule at the end, then you have additional people to help you. The other part is you want to train the frontline managers first. Again, if we see a big announcement is made by senior leadership, the first thing that we're going to do is go back to our manager, back to our desk, and ask for more details. So we want to make sure that the manager has at least heard it, had a time to process it, and they're prepared for the communication. So we do this first by making sure that they have had a chance to process the change themselves, giving them time to make sure that they understand their own WIFM and are ready to assist the staff with the next level of WIFM, which is them. All right. I feel like I want to play wiffle ball after this. So next we have the resistance plan. So that takes us where the PMs, we all know and hope that the best laid plans happen, but they don't always come to fruition. So change management introduces the concept of the resistance plan. And Drew's talked about this a little bit in the beginning. But honestly, what should we do if people resist? And as PMs, we can think about this as similar to monitoring a risk. We have risk mitigation strategies that we're familiar with. So if a risk A happens, then I can do X, Y, and Z to avoid it, mitigate it, transfer it. Those are all terms that you guys should be pretty comfortable with. The same thing with resistance. We don't want to avoid it because this could be detrimental to the success of our adoption. Again, hiding under the desk isn't going to solve anything, but we can mitigate the resist by making sure our communications plan addresses the why. So again, going back to our sponsor, the WIFM, which is our frontline managers, and then the how, which we'll talk a little bit about later. So letting those affected by the change know that, yes, we've thought through all the things that may cause them angst and help them mitigate the risk of them not accepting the change. And lastly, as it might be the tough call about accepting resistance, but sometimes we do have to take a look and review if that person's role is still needed, if their services could be better offered to another division. Sometimes that's just the nature of change. All right, so I got one more slide and then you'll get to hear Drew's voice again.
Keep going, Corey, you're doing great.
Thanks, Drew. So next in our process group, we have the execution. So we've talked about initiation, planning, and naturally the next step is we need to do the work. So we need to execute it. So as PMs, we're often the ones doing the storytelling on our projects, explaining to our project team the goal of the project, how it's trending, making sure that they understand their roles and expectations. But as a project manager with a change management hat on, we want to make sure that the storytelling comes from the sponsor. And we mentioned this before, but we all know that when our leaders take center stage at a town hall and speak to the heart about why they're going that direction, that's when people listen. So in the plan, we've built the sponsorship roadmap, and now we are delivering it. Same things with the comm plan, so our communication plans. We built it before, and now we are executing it. And to me, honestly, this is the funnest part. I have a marketing background, and so I think that this offers opportunities to engage with other departments that you might not have had the chance to work with. So that could be, depending on your project, you could have an internal HR team that will do the communications, internal marketing, public relations, or even legal. So it's kind of a cool way to get involved with different departments. And it's to get the word out of your change in the right context and to the right audience. So just a few quick examples. I worked at a company that they could change the background of monitors for the employees. There's online portals, there's in-app messaging where you can launch stuff when people log in. So we really encourage you to get creative with this. The next part we talked about was a training plan. So when we're executing the training plan, again, you just want to make sure that you've put in ample time, and you can utilize gamification techniques. So these are methods that allow learners who are visual, verbal, all different types of learners to reinforce the training. So I've actually written a whole blog on gamification that Kelly's going to put in the chat if you want to learn a little bit more about different methodologies. But the idea here is it doesn't have to just be, boring training. You can really jazz it up and reinforce the knowledge. All right, Drew, do you want to take us through the next two process groups?
Awesome. My turn. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So Corey talked a lot about plans, and we're project managers. We love plans, right? So there's training plans and comms plans. And well, okay, we've got those. We're PMs. Those are pretty standard. But then there's coaching plans. Okay, a little different. And resistance plans. I don't know if you guys have ever created a resistance plan, but prior to my OCM journey, I really never had. That was a new one for me. There's some other things that we can do. So in monitoring and controlling, we do this across the whole project. What we're really doing here is putting those plans into action. And we're doing that with our stakeholders in mind. So we're going to throw another term at you here, feedback loops, actionable remedies. Feedback loops is really that active listening process. We want to make sure that our sponsors, that our stakeholders, that anybody impacted by this change has a voice in it. And sometimes that's sort of anti-thema to some corporate cultures that, hey, they're employees, they'll get in line. But they're people. It doesn't work that way. People don't like to just get in line for change. So give them a voice. We can do that a lot of different ways. We can have surveys. We can do office hours. It's a pandemic right now, unfortunately, so we can do virtual office hours. We all love Zoom, right? Or WebEx. We can do community forums, focus groups, rumor hotlines. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's not a bad thing. It's not the rumor mill. The important thing here is that we give them a voice, but then it's also crucially important that we listen to them, that we let them know we're listening. So we have to use that active listening technique that we've all learned. It's a safe space. There's no repercussions here. We respect you. We respect your opinion, and we want your opinion. We value your opinion. And that can't just be lip service. This has to be, it's got to be authentic. It's got to be genuine, or that's not going to work so well. So then we enact our resistance plan. If you've got your resistance management plan, it's plan the work the plan, right? Find those pockets of resistance, find out why they're resisting, and then see what we can do to help them feel better about the change, to help them get more comfortable with it. As Corey said, there always is the BFH, right? The big friggin' hammer. We don't want to pull that out if we don't have to. It's not a good tool. Let's find better ways to help people navigate the change. One thing, if we're using the ProSci method, the ADKAR methodology, we can do ADKAR check-ins. And these are very, very lightweight. It's not a ton of work. There's this particular methodology has a lot of documentation already built for it. We can help you with that if you want. But essentially what you do is you send out some surveys, and they're very particular surveys. They're kept very high level, very light, but you might survey the same people multiple times as they go through this journey, so that if they're hitting a barrier point, we're able to get that information by way of the survey, and then we can simply work with them and say, okay, here's what we're going to do to get you past this barrier point so we can get to the next barrier point, and so on and so forth until there are no barriers left. So essentially that's it for the monitoring and controlling. It's fairly straightforward. But all good things must come to an end. So eventually we've got to get to closure. All right. And we know that as project managers, we can't stay on forever. We've got to move on to the next project. But that doesn't mean that change stops. And it doesn't mean then that change management stops when we leave. So you got to have an exit strategy, a transition plan, another plan to throw at you guys. Some organizations are lucky and they have internal organizational change management teams or change management practitioners who are on staff. So that might be a likely place to turn. When you're disengaging as the project manager, you could work with that team and perhaps they can stay on and continue to help folks with their change adoption. But sometimes that's not the case. So we've got to look at who can we pass the torch to? Who's really set up for success in terms of helping to lead the change and reinforce, but also manage resistance? Well, it seems pretty natural then that it's likely going to be your sponsors. It's also going to be the direct managers. But the people experiencing the change, they will listen to their manager. In fact, they'll probably listen to their manager more than they're going to listen to you. You're a project manager, you come and go. But their manager hopefully has built trust with them. And so that's somebody that you can work with. So we go back to our coaching plans. We coach those people during the project so that when we transition out, they are set up for success. They understand what their role is. Sponsors often think, well, I kicked off the project, I'm done. No, sorry, sponsor, you've got work to do here. You got to help your people come to terms with the change. So have that plan. We've got the term hypercare up there. I don't know if everyone's familiar with that term. What it simply means is that at the end of the project, we want to have a period of time when we're providing a hyper level of care, where we're giving you extra care that normally employees don't get during their normal day-to-day business operations, because they're experiencing a very difficult time as a result of our project. So we plan that in, we budget that, but we also make sure in our transition plan that we've got people lined up, that they understand their role. Ideally, they should have a voice in creating that role. So if you can get that sponsor to work with you on the transition plan, they're going to be a lot better positioned to enact it because they had a voice in creating it. As Corey mentioned, they're people too. They're employees, they're people. This has changed for them as well. So that's what we try to do. We set up for success so that we as project managers can step away, but our solution, our product, whatever service we've created lives on because people have adopted that change, and we have a change management plan that continues, a resistance management plan. So now the next question, we've talked about change managers. Is it a project manager's job? We're busy people, right? I mean, we've got a lot on our plates already. We had to learn Agile. We have to be business analysts. Uh-oh, can you guys hear me okay? I had a microphone issue.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. So, is it a project manager's job? And I think we would put it to you that it is. And I know we're busy, but if we want to be successful, we've got to make sure that change is lasting, that we are not just project managers, we're transformation managers. So that's really what we're trying to get to here. If you need to budget more time for it, put that in your plans. That's what we do. Definitely is our position, though, that a project manager is a change manager, and so far nobody's changed my mind on that. All right, at this point, we'll open it up for some questions, I think.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
It sounds weird to me, but so did Drew. So I don't know if it's my internet now.
How about this?
That's better.
Good. Okay. So thank you, everyone, for including your questions in the chat and the ones that you sent privately. I appreciate that. And I did pull some out that I think are really good for the whole group to hear. So Corey and Drew, One of the questions that we had is, how do you deal with a new project with a big change when there's been not great change historically in the organization?
Judy, you want to start? Oh, you're muted.
How about that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, technology. Yeah, a lot of organizations struggle with change, and they struggle with this type of applied approach that putting a methodology in place actually costs money. There's overhead associated with it, but the benefit is worth it. So I think that's a big thing, is to recognize the fact that, hey, maybe we don't have a great track record here. We're project managers. We know the value of lessons learned. Use those lessons learned. Let's look at what went wrong on other similar projects, and then let's see if we can apply different techniques, different practices to this project and maybe get a different result. Corey, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that acknowledging, as Drew mentioned, we're project managers, so we want to have our lessons learned, we want to track it, and we want to make it actionable. And so I think, again, people are smart and they will know if you are shoving facts under the rug and not identifying them. So if you're just open and honest that, this was something we tried before, we didn't have, the right resources or the right people in place, but we're going to do it better this time. And we hope that you'll come along with us, and hopefully they'll have, that inspired hope with you.
Perfect. Okay, so the next question that we have, can you hear me, Drew?
Yeah, Kelly, unfortunately, you're getting a little pixelated again.
Yeah. What about now? Still pixelated?
Yep.
Not great.
It sounds a little ocean. Do you want to put the
question that's chat? Yes.
Yeah. Well, now you sound fine, which is funny.
There you go.
All right. What do you think if your management team is showing resistance to change? Well, that never happens. Yeah. Great question. Like we said, the management team are people as well. And their first response, just like with everybody, is that they're going to be resistant to change. Nobody likes change. So we've got to give them a little extra care. The whole idea of being change professionals, change practitioners, is that we recognize that we've got tools, we've got skills. Bring a particular set of skills to this. So we have to bring that to the management team and bring it to them early. We've got to be able to help them understand what's in it for them. Go back to the WIFM. They're certainly in a position where they need to advocate for the change to their people. So it's critical that we get them on board early and get them on board in a legitimate and a genuine way. Corey, you got any tips or techniques?
Yeah, I think your mention of the WIFM is good, and then also going back to ADCAR. So they might feel like they're resistant because it's not aligned with the company mission or vision. So we need to go back to our sponsor and make sure that we are delivering the why to these managers in a way that they can consume it and understand, so that they can get to the desire to want to now have the change. So we are, Kelly posted a blog about ADCAR, but it is a really awesome tool to help with these lessons learned and past items.
Yeah, one of the things we do when we go to a client where we encounter this type of resistance is we work with the sponsor and we say, hey, we need a coalition. You're not going to win this one on your own, sponsor, so let's build that coalition. So that's part of the coaching plan. We'll put coalition building into that plan. We'll help them understand how to work with their peers, how to work with resistant managers, because if you don't have that coalition, you're going to end up in a position where you're just really, shouting into the wind, and then that's not going to work. So like we said, it's just critically important that we root out that resistance as early as possible and then find a way to turn those people into allies.
All right, so Kelly mentioned that was the last question. So Drew, do you want to take us on to the next slide?
Yeah, sure. Let's get to work. All right. So we've been doing this for a while at Kolme Group. We've been project managers, as we said, for many, many decades, but we're also change managers. And we're happy to help you guys as you become more proficient in this area. Hopefully, we've helped convince you that you do need to be change managers, that this is a critically important skill. So now what we'd like to offer is, if you'd like, a 30-minute consult with us for free. We can talk to you about how you can kind of continue your change management journey. And if you want to get certified, we can kind of counsel you on some of that. If you're interested in how to bring change management, organizational change management into your organization, we'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more about that.
All right, and Kelly did put this link in the chat because we understand that this is not a clickable screen for you guys. So we have that link there, and then we also have our YouTube channel. And as Drew and I mentioned, we are pretty active on LinkedIn. We love chatting through the messenger. So we do invite you guys to connect with us on LinkedIn, check out our YouTube. We nerd out about this stuff, so we're always happy to talk to everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you sticking with us. Hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully it's going to maybe change your perspective a little bit the next time that you're wrapping up a project. You say, did I do the things necessary for this change to stick? Was I transformation agent, or did I just do a project?
Thanks, Drew. Shane, anything else?
No, thank you both, and Kelly too. Thank you for presenting today, and thank you everybody for joining us. I will be posting this recording to the website and the PDF of the deck as well.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, PMI Phoenix.
All right.
Bye.
Good night.